Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Grayzone. We have a really full show today. Uh, it's another war report from Gaza, Lebanon, and apparently Iran. According to the Israeli defense minister, a new escalation is starting soon. We're live on the heavily controlled platform known as YouTube, as well as Rumble, Twitter, and now Rockfin. And there's no real reason to waste any further time. Let's bring in our guest, Jeremy Loffredo, who is just back in New York City. New York City, so nice they had to name it twice. Are you glad to be back, Jeremy?
It feels spectacular to be back from Israel and be out of prison.
So as most of you know, Jeremy Loffredo was in Israel, Palestine, reporting for the Grayzone, and he arrived on the day that Iran retaliated, finally, with a massive ballistic missile volley that was directed at military targets. And Jeremy reported on this extremely newsworthy event, as virtually every other international journalist there did. And then he was arrested for the crime of journalism. I don't think I need to give any further details, except that he was charged with supporting an enemy in wartime, if I'm not incorrect, carries a maximum penalty of life in prison or death, which was extremely disturbing. And now Jeremy's back. This is an exclusive. I mean, this is the first time he's talked about what he went through. So Jeremy, take us, I guess, from the beginning of what happened. You had done this report for us showing the location of two missile strikes. Other reporters had done the same. You included coordinates from Google Maps, and then you set out to the West Bank with a group of other reporters and were arrested. So what happened?
Sure. So the plan when going to Israel and Palestine, this trip was to report on violence in the northern West Bank, in Jenin, in Nablus, in Tulkarm. And then I got there, as you said, the day of the missile strike, and it was so newsworthy. Everyone's talking about it in the entire world. So I thought, let me file a report that talks about this missile strike, get some news, get some information about this, and then I'll go to what I came here to do, which is report in the West Bank. So I filed a report. A few days later, I was going to the West Bank. I was at a military checkpoint outside of Nablus, and our car was stopped. They asked for our passports. Americans are entirely allowed. It's totally legal for Americans to go to the West Bank, all parts of the West Bank. They asked for my passport. I gave them that. I gave them my press credentials. They came back. They said, "We're going to need your phone." I said, "I'm an American. It's legal for me to be here. I don't understand what's happening." They said, "Intelligence." So intelligence told them to grab Jeremy Loffredo's phone. So I hand them my phone. It's locked. They walk away, and then they tell me to get out of the car. And everyone, all the journalists, including me, are sitting now on the ground. And after maybe an hour of sitting on the ground in the sun outside of this military checkpoint in Nablus, they point to me. They say, "Loffredo, come here." I get up. I say, "What's happening?" They say, "You're being arrested." And they pull out maybe 30 feet of cloth, and they wrap it around my head, my eyes, my ears, and part of my nose. They zip tie my hands and they shackle my legs. So I can't hear anything that well, and I can't see anything. And I'm perp walked into a military, Humvee, like a military vehicle. It drives for maybe an hour. I don't know where it's going. It stops at some type of field office in the West Bank, kind of like a tin box. I sit in there for a while, and then I'm finally transferred to I guess it's the West Bank. They would call it the Judea Samaria Police Compound Headquarters. And that's where I'm put in a holding cell, and all the other journalists I was with were all let go except me. And I can hear from the holding cell that the office next to me I hear my voice. They're playing my Grayzone report about the missile strike.
Wow.
So I'm wondering what's happening. This is clearly not an arrest because I'm just somewhere I'm not supposed to be. This is highly political and organized, and it's because of a report that I did, I'm assuming. And they finally walk into the holding cell. They say, "A lawyer's on the phone for you." I answer the phone, and it's a lawyer that some human rights NGO decided to represent me, and I answer the phone, and they say, "Mr. Loffredo, I'm a lawyer, and they're charging you with giving information to an enemy during wartime. This is a very grave crime. Please think hard. What did you do?" And I'm dumbfounded. I can't think of anything I did that would be considered, treason or terroristic or anything like that. And I talked to this lawyer. They were not able to help me because I couldn't think of anything that I did that could possibly be to that level of crime. So I hang up with the lawyer. I'm interrogated for maybe 10 minutes about the video. They asked me who told me to make the video. Why did you make the video? Why did you include this information in the video? My answer to that is I'm a journalist. And my job is to provide as much context and information to readers and viewers. It's a normal journalistic practice to include as much information as possible. And the interrogation stops, and they give me a new pair of handcuffs and a new pair of shackles, and they drive me to a prison in the Russian compound in Jerusalem, where I was in solitary confinement for a few days and in and out of court.
I feel like there are some details that
Good.
that you should that I remember you telling me that you might have left out about. First of all, I mean, some of the other journalists who were with you said they were abused, had guns drawn on them. A Palestinian journalist was forced to sit in the sun for 2 hours, and
no, you're entirely correct. While we were still at the checkpoint, we were not only blindfolded and shackled and forced to sit in vehicles that were taking arbitrary rides around the West Bank, really to like kind of confuse us about what's happening. But during the time where they were asking for our cell phones, one of the journalists I was with refused to give his cell phone, and he was grabbed by the neck, drawn out of the car, dragged out of the car, and guns were drawn on him as he was pushed against the ground. And this is simply an Israeli citizen, a journalist that was in the car with me. They were treating us all of us journalists as we were enemies of the state. But I'm the only one who actually got charged being an enemy of the state. But they were, other than being blindfolded and thrown into military vehicles, we were physically abused. We were told to sit in the sun. They kept making jokes to us, they're pointing us and saying, no, vitamin D is good for you. Vitamin D is good for you. You love Israel. And they were kind of taunting us. And it was a horrible experience. And that was only the beginning of the saga.
So the Russian compound, I know it well, not from the inside, but I would always pass it. It's where often Palestinian security prisoners are held and sometimes tortured. You were held in solitary confinement there. What was that like? What happened there?
Well, in solitary confinement, there was probably maybe 150 prisoners that were in the jail with me. They were separated from me. They were all Palestinian. I was the only American. I was the only white person, from what I could tell. It was me and all Palestinians. And I was held in solitary confinement for 3 days. And I was given 1 cup of chocolate pudding over the course of 3 days. That was all the food I was given. And I was given maybe 1 or 2 tiny little plastic cups of water during the 3 days. I would ask for more water. They would act like they did not hear me. I would ask for water, and then they would just say no. I would ask sometimes just the time. I would ask a guard what time it was, because I was totally unaware of what time of day it even was, because time was passing in such a strange way in solitary confinement. They would tell me the time, and that kind of kept me aware of what time it was, and maybe like when I have court, when maybe I should go to sleep. And at one point, the embassy apparently sent a social worker to check on me. And I thought, like, this is a great development. Someone's going to
the U.S. embassy.
Yes, apparently.
Okay. And this social worker were they American or Israeli or?
The social worker was Israeli, and the social worker introduced themselves. And I thought to myself, like, a kind of a sigh of relief, like, okay, this person's at least going to give me water. And her first question was, why did you hurt Israel? You hurt Israel. And I was like, oh, this is the person who's here to check on me is berating me because she's seeing my paper outside my cell that I gave information to the enemy during wartime. So the social worker, who was apparently, Israeli, but sent by the embassy to check on me, is treating me like a terrorist, did not offer me any food, did not offer me any water, only asked why I hurt Israel and if I love Israel. And this conversation is happening. She's outside the cell. She's opening the steel slide to ask me these questions, and then she leaves. So that was the only type of care that the embassy gave me. They sent me an Israeli to ask me why I hurt Israel.
So before we move to the next stage, so you're in solitary confinement. They're basically starving you, depriving you of water, as they do to Palestinians. Mm-hmm. Did the U.S. embassy provide you with any other assistance other than that social worker who basically interrogated you?
No.
So the U.S. embassy did nothing for you at that point.
They did absolutely nothing. They knew I was an American citizen. They knew I was from New York. They probably knew because they are. I would assume they can read. They can see that the charges are bogus, and still they do nothing for me except send me an Israeli to interrogate me further and call that person a social worker.
Then were you at any point, abused while you were in the Russian compound? Or, I mean, I saw a photo of you. They put you in front of the Israeli flag and photographed you, which they do to humiliate Palestinian prisoners.
They put me in front of the Israeli flag. They put me in front of a kind of a nationalist flag with a war slogan on it. Together we will win. These are all over Israel right now. And they took photos of me, not official photos with a camera. They were taking photos. These belligerent, fanatical guards and policemen were just taking photos on their iPhone and laughing. It was not for any official purpose. I think that they were sending them into their WhatsApp groups and simply just making fun of me. They'd walk past my cell every now and then. They say, "Do you love Israel?" And I wouldn't answer. And then two others would come by and ask me if I love Israel. They weren't professional in any way. They simply saw me as a terrorist to like berate and make fun of as I waited in solitary confinement for my court appearances. But while I was in the Russian compound, you say that's a place where they, it's mostly Palestinians. Palestinians are tortured there. While I'm in solitary confinement, there was a time where I could hear crying and screams of someone who I have no idea what was happening, but it seemed like they were getting physically hurt. You would hear cries and screams and something in Arabic, then it would stop, and then it would start up again very, very quickly and very violently. So I assumed that this person was being physically harmed in some way in a cell very close to mine, but I couldn't see anything because I was in solitary confinement.
And so you were in this cell for 3 days you weren't allowed out at any point except to be taunted and photographed.
I wasn't allowed at any point. I wasn't allowed out at any point because there was a toilet in there, so there was no reason for them to let me out ever. I was in solitary confinement. I've never been in prison. I've never been in trouble with the law. This is my first time ever being in trouble with the law. It's Israeli law, and I'm put in solitary confinement and treated like an enemy of the state.
So then you had some hearings, I guess, with two judges. You were allowed out.
Mm-hmm. They open the thing. They allow me to speak to my lawyer for maybe 30 seconds to a minute and a half, and then they walk me with shackles and handcuffs into a courtroom where the entire court takes place in a language that I don't speak. I don't speak Hebrew. The entire court thing was in Hebrew, and I wasn't given a translator. So I'm sitting there, they're talking about me, and I can't even advocate for myself or speak to my lawyer because I don't know what they're saying. But the first judge, if I can start talking about what happened in court, the police want me to be detained for 7 more days as they try to build their case against me and tried to say that I aided and gave information to the enemy. And they were asked by the judge, what evidence do you have that this person is a threat to Israel and that he needs to continue being detained? And they said the information is top secret. So they weren't willing to tell the judge anything. It didn't seem like they had anything. And I think even the judge knew that they weren't able to say anything other than that it's top secret and I'm an American and I didn't do anything violent, and they're only talking about my public reporting and they're trying to frame that as giving information to an enemy. So the judge said, okay, you can have him, we'll keep him for 1 day, not 7, 1. So you can take this 1 day, you can interrogate him, you can learn more about him, and we'll be here again in court tomorrow. And so the police, I went back to solitary confinement, and the police did not take advantage of that time, and they did not interrogate me more. So like you would assume that if they really thought I was a threat to the state of Israel, that they would take advantage of having me in their custody and ask me questions. They didn't even interrogate me anymore. So we went to court the next day after I spent another night in solitary confinement. And the judge says, "What did you learn? Did you learn anything? You had him for one more day." And they say, "Judge, we didn't learn anything new, but we need him to stay because we want to look through his cell phone and we think he's a threat to the state of Israel." And a man stood up, and he was a journalist from Ynet News, an Israeli news organization, and he testified on my behalf because I was being accused of aiding and giving information to enemy during wartime. And this journalist published all the information I published and embedded my video in his article. And he was only able to publish this article because he went through the military censor, and he had a conversation with the military censor of him saying, "Is this secret? Is this okay to publish?" And the military censor says, "Yes, there's nothing secret in that video." And so he hands his phone and shows this conversation to the judge. The judge looks at it and says, "Well, if he was able to publish this information and it's not secret, then this journalist was able to publish the information without being secret. I don't understand what the problem is." So he said he's no longer detained. He ruled, now this is the second judge that rules against the police in my favor. And the police, after the window closed, for them able to what would the word be? They appealed it. But they appealed it after the window had closed. So I'm in prison and I'm signing the papers to leave the prison. I'm so excited. I'm leaving solitary confinement. The judge ruled in my favor. This is great. They grab me as I'm signing these papers. They say something in Hebrew. They bring me back to solitary confinement. They don't tell me why. So now I'm back in solitary confinement, even though the judge said I'm free to go. So I'm very confused. They still don't let me talk to a lawyer. I'm in solitary confinement for another night. And because they appealed, my case goes to another court, a district court. And I go there. I'm perp walk to a van, thrown in a dark van with shackles and handcuffs once again, and I'm brought to court. And this is my final day in court, where the judge rules that they have yet to find any information that proves that I'm an enemy of the state. Everything that I published looks like, to the judge at least, based on the information that the judge has, looks like nothing was secret because it was published in Israel, in America, tons of times in more detail than me, before me. Like there's no reason for this detainment any longer. That the judge ruled this, and so I was let out. But with a caveat of the police keep my passport, my phone, and my laptop. They're able to perform a digital strip search of me for the next 10 days, and I'm not allowed to leave the country. And on day 10, they will decide whether or not they want to rearrest me, or if I'm able to go, if I'm deported. But for this 10 days, I'm able to leave detainment, but I have to stay in the country, and I'm mandated to go to this police compound in the West Bank and be interrogated whenever they ask me to, which they did. I was interrogated several times during these 10 days, free.
Yeah. So during this sort of house arrest period, where you're trapped in what the Palestinian author Emil Habibi referred to as the big prison after coming out of the little prison, you are summoned to a police station in the occupied West Bank, kind of near the Kalandia checkpoint.
Yes, exactly.
So what happens then?
So this is the police compound, the headquarters of all of the police in the West Bank, and they asked me to go there. I show up, and they interrogate me for 7 hours. I have water. We take very little breaks. We take one break so the interrogator can go have a cigarette. I have to stay put. And they interrogate me for 7 hours on my 5-minute long video report. It's almost unbelievable. And they asked me questions like, they asked me, so you went to college for journalism. You went to college for journalism. You took classes. You had professors. You read about it. I said, yes, of course. And they said, so you expect me to believe you never learned the importance of a government censor? I said, well, I mean, in America, we have the First Amendment. We really don't have, a formal government censor. Yeah, no, I really didn't learn anything like that. I didn't learn anything like that. And he asked me this in, 5 different ways. Every question is asked 10 different ways, trying to, play semantics with me, trying to trip me up on questions. And it's really unfair because the interrogator, the police officer, is the man who also transcribes the interrogation. So I will answer a question with yes, and then I'll give a giant caveat, and he'll record my answer as I just said yes. So he's essentially editing my quotes and trying to build my case using my own words against me live during this interrogation. I see him thinking, backspacing, retyping things while I'm speaking. He's editing my words in real time, and this is what's going to be shown to a judge if and when they bring me back to court. And they asked me, all these different ways if I know anyone, in a foreign military, and of course I don't. This lasts for 6 or 7 hours from very early in the morning to like dinner time. And finally, so I might add, I keep referencing this PBS NewsHour video. This PBS NewsHour video was published by PBS NewsHour journalists the night of the attacks. This guy was in front of where a missile struck outside of the Mossad headquarters. He says, "This is a big crater. Behind me is the Mossad headquarters. I'm about this many feet away from the Mossad headquarters." All the information that I had, except way before me, and has way more views than my video did because this went viral, had 3 million views on Twitter.
Yeah.
So
I can play it right now.
Yeah, go ahead. Of course.
This is Nick Schifrin from PBS. Yeah. He did this report preceded Jeremy's report from the same location. When Jeremy arrived, the crater had already been filled in as Israel sought to cover it up. So it was unclear what Jeremy's infraction was. In fact, I communicated with Nick Schifrin, and he was very helpful and told me that he does have a government press office card, which means that everything he does must clear the military censor. I've had that card as well. And so this cleared the military censor. And here's this brief report from Mossad headquarters.
This is the impact site for one of those Iranian ballistic missiles. And if you see the size of this crater, that's about 30 feet deep and maybe 50 feet wide. You can see all the debris around here. And to give you a sense of the targets for these strikes, that white building back there, about 1,500 feet behind me, is the headquarters of the spy agency, the Mossad.
So, I mean, if Iran wanted to recalibrate its strikes or something, which came up in your interrogation, all they have to do is geolocate that. It's not like they need whatever you supplied on Google Maps in your video, which everyone has access to. He's showing right where Mossad headquarters is. It's right there. Everyone knows where it is. It's in Google Maps. So, I mean, on so many levels, the case against you was patently absurd.
Yeah, it was. Not only was it public information that you could find on Google, but it was explicitly reported in the same way that I reported it by Israeli media, American media, foreign media. Nothing that I reported was information that only I had. This is information that government journalists inside of Israel had, and that the whole world had, as long as they have Google. So to say that by simply, publishing the news is giving the enemy information. I mean, as long as the enemy has Google, then every journalist is giving the enemy information. It's just like, it's such a strange way to think of journalism.
And so that the Israeli police pretended this video by him didn't exist. We put together a dossier showing that Israeli media was publishing satellite images showing the location precisely of Iranian missile impacts, which was also more precise than anything you provided.
Of course, in my video, I go to, maybe a mile outside of the Nevatim air base where a missile had fallen near a Bedouin village. And so I'm very far away from the base, far away from anything sensitive. And I'm just talking to people near where a missile fell, and I record the missile in the middle of the desert. And Israeli media is publishing satellite images from the day after above Nevatim air base. You could see the inside of the base. This is so much more sensitive information than I had. I was very far from outside the base. So you can't help but think of that information as this was political, and this was because the Grayzone is very critical of Israel, and this has nothing to do with the actual information in my video. This has to do with the content of our reporting here at Grayzone.
Right. And so they were essentially accusing you of being a deep Iranian spy. Is that the sense you got?
Yes, that's the line of questioning was always, do you know anyone in these countries that we don't like, Lebanon, Gaza, Iran, like they didn't want to believe that that this is just journalistic inquiry. This is just work. They thought that, clearly if you're reporting on this, you must have inside information or friends in places in countries that we don't like. They didn't even want to admit that I was a journalist until they saw that I have hundreds of bylines and I've made videos and like I am truly a journalist. I have a press card. They could no longer try to act like they didn't know I was a journalist.
And why would they accuse you of, like, what was their basis for accusing you of any ties to Iran? The Grayzone has no connection to Iran or any other government for that matter. So what was their basis? I mean, just paranoia?
If they did have a basis, they didn't make it clear to me or the court. And like, if you're in court and you're trying to, convince the judge that I'm a threat to the state of Israel, any ties that me or the organization I work for has with a foreign government would be the first thing that they bring to the court. But they didn't bring anything. So it seems like they had absolutely nothing other than, a political axe to grind against myself in the Grayzone.
Well, this is my speculation. And I'm going to be backing up this speculation more and more in the coming weeks and months, which is that when you Google the Grayzone or look at first of all, our Wikipedia page is just a collection of smears, distortions of half-truths, and lies. And Jimmy Wales, who is the intelligence-tied CEO of Wikipedia, has come out against us, DM'd people saying he thinks we're a Russian propaganda front. He hates us. He's involved with organizations that are funded by the Pentagon and State Department that have smeared us. But then you have this Washington Post piece by the obvious CIA asset, Joseph Menn, which falsely implies in the sleaziest way possible that we're tied to Iran. News site editors, this is ties to Iran, Russia show misinformation's complexity. I mean, it also falsely claims we're tied to Russia. And one of the points in this sleazy, libelous, defamatory smear, and I'm not done with the Washington Post here, although we've published several responses and extracted a retraction from the Washington Post, which appears at the top of this article, which you can see here. I'm not done with them because it appears that there are real world consequences that our journalists that contribute to the Grayzone are facing as a result of this bogus smear. And the tie to Iran is Wyatt Reed, who helps me edit the Grayzone, works with me, had publicly, openly done some freelance production work, or like he said so on his Twitter account, done freelance production work years ago for Press TV covering Black Lives Matter protests, which had nothing to do with anything we're covering now, and got a pittance for it, according to these hacked documents that the Washington Post had, even though Wyatt was public about that. And they cite you having been, when you were starting out your journalistic career, a producer for RT, although Russia isn't an enemy, considered an enemy of Israel. But I mean, this is what comes up when you look us up. Maybe this was their secret information that they had about you, which led them to hold you hostage and effectively torture you for reporting that other reporters were already doing. Do you have any comments on that? Or
it's very likely that maybe that was their intelligence, their secret intelligence was this Washington Post article. But I think even they knew that the article wouldn't hold any water in court and that a judge wouldn't consider, Wyatt Reed appearing talking about Black Lives Matter on Press TV years before he was at the Grayzone. They didn't. The judge would not let that fly. So they thought maybe that if they looked through my cell phone and my computer and they interrogate me for hours on end, something else of real substance would come up. But that real substance, it does not exist, obviously. And so, 3 judges in a row ruled that the police don't have anything, but it's very possible that what they did have was that Washington Post article, and they thought that there was more to the story when there actually wasn't.
Yeah, and this sleazebag Mossad asset named Benjamin Weinthal for the Israeli I-24 outlet just took that article, which contains no evidence, doesn't even claim the Grayzone is funded by Russia or Iran, and then produced a headline that said Grayzone funded by Iran and Russia, and they didn't produce any evidence beyond his headline. This is a guy who used to be housed at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, which has been publicly identified by Israeli intelligence agents as an Israeli government cutout. So again, it all goes back to the Washington Post. Indeed, democracy dies in darkness. And as it becomes clear that that article is going to have real world consequences for us, we are going to take action against the Washington Post, and everyone should. And understand how sleazy and dangerous U.S. mainstream media is here. There was another instance, and I mean, I don't want to get too off track, but one of the journalists, and I don't know if you want to comment on this, I'll comment on it because I waited to comment on it. One of the journalists who was with you, who is detained and abused at this West Bank checkpoint, who goes by Andre X, who I guess is a Russian Jewish reporter. He actually was giving me information immediately after you were detained and was helpful. And I cited his account of being beaten and abused by Israeli soldiers. He then went on to denounce you under pressure from his Russian liberal colleagues.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to address that. I'm trying to pull up the.
He is like a anti-Putin activist, liberal activist. Was in Russia, and then the war started, and he's Jewish, and he got his Israeli citizenship, and so he moved to Israel, and now his audience is a mix of Russian liberals and also anti-Zionist, pro-Palestine activists, and so when it came out that he was in the car with a Grayzone reporter, his entire, liberal Russian audience, it was as if he committed treason against them. What are you doing with the Grayzone? They're pro-Russia. They're Putin puppets. All the propaganda that you hear from the NAFO trolls on Twitter.
Yeah.
And he prioritized these, social relationships and his like anti-Putin clout on the internet. And the day after I was let out of solitary confinement, he denounced the Grayzone and being with me, and he lied, and he acted like he didn't know who I was when I had talked to him at length before we met up. He just never thought, I guess, it would be public that he was with me. And he totally threw me under the bus, even though I was facing 25 years to life in prison. He thought it was more important to make sure that everyone knows he doesn't like Russia.
Yeah, so here's from the Andre X, who I think has previously worked for the U.S. State Department-backed outlet Medusa, and now poses as some kind of edgy anarchist reporter. There was a lot of speculation online because I was arrested with a contributor, misspelled contributor, for Grayzone, a pro-Russian publication. I want to make something very clear. I do not support the fascist Russian regime, and I never will. I stand unequivocally against all imperialism. So by sitting next to you in a car, he was implicated as basically supporting Russia by all of his tool colleagues. And he sold you out at a time when you were in the hands of violent Israeli prison guards, the same ones who have been raping Palestinian men in torture camps, and you were held in solitary confinement. This guy denounces you as pro-Russian, lending credence to the sense that you represent some kind of foreign government.
A
I
state.
mean, this is the ultimate, and it wouldn't be the first time I've witnessed in intimate fashion treason from a professional leftist poser, but this is another level. This is shocking. I mean, to have a journalist sell you out like that, when mainstream journalists from PBS like Nick Schifrin actually supported your freedom by being helpful with us, and the Committee to Protect Journalists, which is as mainstream as you can get, stood up for you. You have these like this clown throwing you under the bus.
He said, you know, I never want to collaborate with anyone who works for a publication that, you know, that washes and promotes, you know, fascist narratives, whether it be Russian, Iranian, or Israeli. Like he said that. And then I believe just weeks ago, he was with a handful of Haaretz journalists in the West Bank. So like, it's strange that like he draws the line for, you know, like independent media that is, we can't be with independent media that supports fascist regimes, but I can be with Haaretz journalists who, you know, every day on the cover, on the front page of the website of Haaretz, there's something, you know, they're laundering Netanyahu talking points. They're as mainstream as it gets in Israel. They're
a Zionist publication.
Of course. And so it's, he's picking and choosing. Like I can be with Haaretz, even though they support Israel, but I can't be with Grayzone because sometimes they're critical of the US role in the proxy war in Eastern Europe. It's just like, he's not being consistent. He's not that bright, but he's clearly he's clearly has no moral or ethical standards. He threw another journalist under the bus as they were being held by the, you know, the only apartheid state in the world that's currently committing a genocide, and he thought it was more important to make a stand against Putin.
Yeah, I mean, usually in times like this, you can judge who your friends are by who speaks up, and who aren't your friends by who's silent. And certainly there were some noticeably silent people, but you don't expect someone who was actually detained with you, like arrested and beaten with you, to just sell you out like that, just to maintain their State Department street credibility. But anyway, you were basically forced to open your phone, or they hacked into your phone and your devices. Can you tell us more about the Israeli police, and therefore Israeli intelligence, had full access to your devices, and they were looking for evidence that you were some kind of deep Iranian spy. So what happened there?
Well, all my electronics, my laptop, my phone, they were seized, you know, within the first minutes of being in their custody and control. Like as soon as I walked into the prison, they took all my stuff. They took all my laptops, my phone, and they asked me to open my phone. And I said no, because I knew I didn't commit any crimes. I shouldn't be, you know, I shouldn't be opening my phone and you know, giving away my privacy without actually committing any crimes. So I said no. And they had my phone, they had my laptop this entire time. They clearly they never brought up in court that they found something. But I will say there was one occasion where I went in for interrogation and they said, "We want to see your conversation. You said that Max Blumenthal sent you the PBS NewsHour video, and we want to see the conversation from October 2nd from Max sending it to you, and we want to click the link and we want to watch it ourselves." I said, I mean, like, I knew that I could do. That is exactly what's in my phone, and like, if that will make them see that I'm not a criminal or a terrorist or a traitor, like that's perfect, because that's all there on my cell phone. So I went to the office. I put in my passcode. I went to my conversation with you, and right then and there, in the place that I said it would be, is a text from you saying, like, you know, look at this PBS NewsHour report. I click on it. It says media cannot load, or media unavailable on Twitter. And I had just watched the video hours before I went there, and with me, because I knew that this video is so important, and they keep acting like it doesn't exist over and over for hours on end. I bring it up in court, I bring it up in interrogation, and they seem to not care about it, or don't believe me that it's a real video. I bring a paper that has frame by frame of the video with Hebrew translations. and I give it to them. And I'm thinking in my head, like, of course they've already seen this. I'm just giving to them as a favor. Like, I know they've seen the video. It doesn't matter, but I'm going to give them this paper because now it has Hebrew translation. They don't really speak English. And he looks at the paper as if I gave him, something top secret and so special. He's never seen this video before. It looks like he's looking at it really closely. He's taking notes. And I'm thinking, like, this is a video I brought up to you almost probably 100 times by now. How is it possible that you guys have not watched this video that I'm talking about and bring up in court? It's the main piece of evidence that I'm pointing to that I got this information from. I didn't get it from Iran. I got it from PBS, and this is the video, and they have never seen it. And it seemed to me that the police were censored from seeing this video. Like, that could be why they didn't believe me, because they couldn't find this video.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of content is censored inside Israel. For example, I did a video years ago in which I exposed a Holocaust denier, like a Holocaust revisionist, for and uncovered a secret event they did like many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You're not allowed to watch it in Israel just because it simply deals with the topic of Holocaust revisionism or Holocaust denial. And so on any Wi-Fi network in Israel, you just simply can't watch it. So that might have been what happened with you.
But I think it's even more interesting than that. It's the fact that I was at a house in Jerusalem. I was at a cafe in Jerusalem. I'm able to watch the video at these places, but it's particularly on the police Wi-Fi network that it's unavailable. It's almost as if the censors are covering their own ass, and they don't want the police to see videos that put Israel in a bad light, because then they'll get reprimanded by their bosses. Like, it's almost like it's not particularly political. It's like, because it's not actually censored. It's only censored for, politicians and police, but it's not censored for anybody else in Israel. So like, I maybe that's why they weren't able to see this video.
Well, that, makes it's very frustrating. But ultimately what I thought would happen was this would all go before a judge. They would see that it was meritless. The police would go through all of your devices and find nothing connecting you to any, foreign enemy, because you and we have nothing to hide there. And then the judge would let you go. But that's not what happened. October 20th, the deadline rolled around, and this was a day after Shabbat. So basically there'd been all these holidays and nothing had happened. And then all of a sudden, what, you're out, or what happened?
Well, during these holidays, we were able to send several dossiers of proof that both American media and Israeli media published what I published, sometimes in more detail before me. So we sent them, 20 pages of information that proves my innocence, essentially. We sent them a video file of the PBS News report and a few other reports, just in case they were actually censored from seeing them. They can actually click on this video file without the internet. We sent them a few statements of concern, and people, kind of corroborating the fact that I am a real journalist in America, and like, I'm not a spy. So we just sent everything to them. It's holidays. We don't know if they're reading it or not. But then Sunday comes around, the 20th, the day that I find out if I'm getting rearrested or not. My lawyer gets a call and they say, "Can Mr. Loffredo book a sooner flight?" And she says, "Of course." And I don't have my phone. I don't have my wallet. I don't have anything. So I rush to my lawyer's office, and I use a computer at my lawyer's office, and I book a flight as soon as I can. And we send the flight number and the confirmation to the police, and they go incommunicado after that. We have not heard from them since. We send them the flight number, and my lawyer says, "Okay, well, we sent it. They asked you to book a flight. Let's give somebody, a power of attorney to pick up your things and see if they give it to them. We don't know if they will, but let's see." So someone goes to pick up my passport, my laptop, and my phone, and they do give it to them. So now I have all my belongings, and I have a flight that they told me to book. So my lawyer reaches out one last time and says, "Can you give Mr. Loffredo a letter that says he is allowed to leave the country and he's free to go?" They don't answer. No one answers. They're done talking to my lawyer. So I go to Ben Gurion Airport. I try to leave the country, and I get, interrogated there. twice, and they ask me questions. I show them a letter from my lawyer. I show them like news articles that say the 20th is the day that Jeremy finds out if he gets rearrested or not. And I'm like, today's the 21st. So like, I am leaving. I'm allowed to go. And they ask me some questions. They go on the Grayzone website, their eyebrows raised. They a face of disgust as they're looking through the Grayzone website, but they can't actually, they see that the police have already dealt with me in some way or another. They don't want to step on anyone's toes, I think. So they let me go and they let me leave the country. And this is something that's been happening more and more in Israel. They don't want to go through the bureaucracy of actually charging someone and actually deporting someone. So they've been calling this informal deportation, where they just tell you to book a flight. And if you know what's best for yourself, you'll leave the country. And I think they just wanted to get me out of there. And I successfully left Israel.
Which was a huge relief to us and everyone watching, because it's unclear what they're capable of doing, especially when the police is effectively under the control of Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who doesn't even pretend to believe in the rule of law. He just believes the police should advance these supremacist imperatives that are at the core of the logic of Zionism, which is what obviously helped embolden the cops and jailers that were abusing you in the beginning. So fortunately, you made it out. A lot of people don't realize you can actually get interrogated on your way out of Israel. So it's, sort of one final hurdle to clear before leaving the big prison. So what were your thoughts just overall on what this disturbing saga says about the contemporary state of Israel during this, what seems like this kind of endless open-ended war that keeps escalating? I mean, do you have any thoughts or insights?
It's the censorship regime in Israel right now. I mean, they have a military censor, which is absurd by itself. But when the military censor isn't efficient enough, it graduates from military censorship and it goes to, the threat of future violence, which is like lawfare and being thrown in jail. Because of course I'm a journalist, but if I refuse to follow orders, I would have had, physical harm by the hands of the state done to me. So it graduated from just digital censorship, and now it's gone to, the threat of violence by the state. And of course, the threat of violence by the state of Israel towards journalists in Gaza is something that has been happening, this year and in years past. The threat of violence is more than just being held in solitary confinement. The threat of violence is being put on a kill list and being killed. But the fact that that is now, they've graduated from just threatening Palestinian journalists with violence, and they've gone to American journalists inside of Israel. It's supposed to be it's our greatest ally. No one from America helped me out. Israel was trying to charge me with 25 years to life. Like they hold such contempt for anyone who is trying to tell the world what is happening inside of Israel, that, censorship does not work on its face. They need to put people physically in a prison, or they need to kill them. They're heightening the courage threshold for journalists to operate inside of Israel so high that no journalist will go there because they might be charged with life in prison. The courage threshold is, are you willing to risk your life? And so that's gonna scare tons of people in the press away who value their own life. The courage threshold is so high that you can't go there right now as a journalist.
As an independent reporter, certainly. I mean, the reporters who have a government press office card have a little bit more protection, and they're not giving them out to anyone outside of mainstream media that's already kind of controlled or could face pressure from the Israel lobby. And you mentioned the violence that is being meted out to Palestinian journalists in Gaza. I think 180 journalists and media professionals in Gaza have been murdered since October 7th. Al Jazeera's entire team in northern Gaza, where Israel is carrying out a massive campaign of ethnic cleansing, which we'll discuss in a minute, was just put on a kill list. This is the quote unquote Israel Defense Forces exposed. 6 Al Jazeera journalists have been exposed as Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists. They don't expose them. They don't provide any information. They just they just say, here they are, and we're going to kill them.
They just made a graphic.
They just made a graphic. This is the same thing they did posthumously to Ismail Al-Ghul, the main Al Jazeera correspondent in the Gaza Strip, who was assassinated in a targeted strike. They blew his head off while he was covering just people paying their respects to Ismail Haniyeh's home in the Shati refugee camp in Gaza. And then they said he had been a terrorist who was recruited by Hamas and was in Hamas since since a certain date. I think it was like 2007. And that's when he was 10 years old. So they said that he joined Hamas as a militant when he was 10. It was a complete fabrication to just paper over the fact that they blew a journalist's head off. So now they want to kill these guys because they're exposing one of the most hideous stages of this genocide, where about 100 to 170,000 people are being driven south at tank muzzle point with US made bombs, and at least 50 people are being killed a day. Is there any reason, based on your own experience, to believe Israel could be telling the truth about these Al Jazeera journalists in northern Gaza?
No, I mean, I think it was Julian Assange who argued and wrote, and that he wrote, "Censorship is a cause for celebration," because it shows that the power structure and the position on the moral high ground is so weak that you need to censor and kill people who are just simply putting out information. It shows that they know that they don't have the moral high ground. They're not acting righteous in this war. They know that they're wrong. So any information that gets out about this war, it needs the people putting out the information need to be killed. They need to be put in jail. They need to be silenced. No information can come out, and like that just kind of shows how weak their actual arguments are, and their power position is. Like they can't have any information get out.
Yeah,
like any information is harmful to them, that's so telling.
And absolutely, I mean, particularly what people are seeing in northern Gaza. I mean, I've been watching this day after day since Israel invaded Gaza, and what I'm seeing there is it doesn't fail to shock me. I think it's important to note that you received a massive outpouring of support, not just from our viewers who are watching this, supporters, and from our colleagues, but also from unexpected sources. I mentioned Committee to Protect Journalists, Freedom of the Press Foundation, the Courage Foundation, and your former boss, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., in his pre-Shmuley stage, helped nurture your journalistic career. You did some great journalism for Children's Health Defense. And I reached out to him, and he was immediately responsive. And he attempted to work whatever sources he had, and then issued a statement emphasizing his support for Israel. Basically, no one can deny that RFK Jr. is a huge supporter of Israel. It's very unfortunate. I mean, I've criticized him harshly. I've been very harsh because I think it is a poison pill that undercuts all of the rest of his anti-war activism. But regardless, on pure principle, he stood up for you and asserted that, you were a courageous journalist who he had worked with when they were accusing you of not being a journalist. So I think that was critical. And to have all of these other press freedom organizations stand up for you. So we're really grateful to everyone who spoke out. I think that was pivotal in getting Jeremy out. And, any thoughts on that, as well as whether the State Department actually did anything on your behalf?
Well, I mean, I mean, this is a comparison that is so easy to make, and other people have made it. But I'm an American journalist, and I was detained by a client state. So the U.S. government was silent, but we had an American journalist from the Wall Street Journal detained by an official enemy, Russia, and everyone in the media. Jake Tapper was tweeting about it every single day. Everyone in the State Department, everyone in the federal government, they spoke about it every single day. It kind of is it's the worthy victims and unworthy victims. It's obviously a journalist detained by a client state is a unworthy victim, because you can't. There's nothing to. You can't manufacture any type of political support for your policies when something bad like that happens. But when your enemy takes an American journalist, you can accuse them of being undemocratic, authoritarian, all of these words. But like, no one from the U.S. government or the State Department said anything about me until I left. A journalist was nice enough to say, "Do you have any comment on Jeremy Loffredo?" And the State Department spokesperson said, "I believe Mr. Loffredo has left Israel." And like, okay, I mean, I did actively, like, that is what I did. I left Israel, but like, I was forced to leave Israel. I was held in solitary confinement. Like, just that passive language makes it seem like I went to the airport and I had a great time in Israel and I left. And that's the fact that the only thing they said is I left Israel is so, that's the only thing that they talk about during my entire stay there. I was, held in solitary confinement. I was effectively tortured, not given any water or food. And all he says is I left Israel. It's so shallow and so empty. And to say that that's the only sentence that the State Department said. So I don't believe that they did anything. But maybe a back channel was established and they said this could be a diplomatic nightmare. Please get him out of there. That's possible. But there's no evidence of that.
Let's watch that real quick. And I really appreciate the reporter at least asking this question.
And does the department have any comment about the arrest of U.S. citizen and journalist Jeremy Loffredo in Israel earlier this month? Last we heard, a district court ordered Mr. Loffredo to remain in Israel until October 20th for police questioning. What's his current status?
My understanding is that Mr. Loffredo has left Israel.
What? Well, that was it. I mean, they were clearly monitoring it. They were ready for the question, and
they knew exactly, because that video, that briefing came out right maybe an hour after I landed in Italy, in Rome, because that's where my flight went to. So they knew within hours of me leaving the country. So they're speaking to the authorities in Israel. They know if I'm in Israel or if I'm not in Israel. They're talking about it. So it is like, you can assume that they were monitoring the situation and that they knew exactly what's happening to me there. And they didn't say anything, deliberately, on purpose. They chose not to advocate on behalf of their own citizen being held by the Netanyahu regime.
Yeah. I think I know that reporter just from the briefing room. He's not Michael Tracy, for those of you wondering. But he's very pro-Israel. Like, I've heard him, before the briefings just go on like rants about how he supports Israel. But he's the one who wound up kind of asking them about it. I think he's from Epoch Times. I'm not sure, but that was important to do. And so I think you get a lot of support from unexpected places. The State Department, I don't know what they did behind the scenes, but publicly they didn't say anything. Another reason I was worried too about you is look at what they did with Gonzalo Lira. They just let him languish in Ukraine and die in a prison cell. We still don't know the full story there. I mean, that's such a bizarre saga. But I hope to learn more. We're still digesting your court documents. Aaron, if you want to join us and, ask Jeremy anything or comment, give me a thumbs up. All right. Welcome to the Grayzone, Aaron Mate. How's it going? What do you think the State Department and their advocacy for Jeremy?
Well, based on what I just heard today, not very impressed. And you think this would be more of a story? You know, Jeremy mentioned the contrast between how not just the State Department, but the U.S. media advocated for Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal, and him. And by the way, you know, like one thing I noticed this is a very minor point, but like one difference also in the way that Jeremy was treated versus Evan Gershkovich is like people weren't afraid to say the name, the Wall Street Journal, that's the outlet that he was reporting for. But I noticed that like even among some of our independent media colleagues, like the Grayzone has cooties, so they feel as if you say the name Grayzone out loud, they might contrast cooties, so they just would avoid the fact that he reports for the Grayzone, which is just another odd aspect of all this, and it speaks to how petty, unfortunately, independent media can be. But yeah, I mean, it's not just the State Department. The way the media just kind of yawned at a client state, as Jeremy talked about, abducting a U.S. journalist and holding him for so long, that was disappointing, but not surprising. And even the people who did speak up on Jeremy's behalf, I have to note, some people felt the need to caveat everything with how much they don't like the Grayzone and blah, 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 blah. And it's just funny. It's just, you learn every day new ways in which people have contempt for actual independent adversarial media, to the point where even someone being abducted by a proxy state of the U.S., that's not enough to get them to, you know, just do the minimal thing, which is advocate for his release and not have to apologize for doing so and caveat their pleas for his freedom.
Can you guys keep it moving for like 30 seconds? I just got blown out for a second. All right, I'll be right back. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, you know, since we have you, let's talk about the reporting you did in Israel, Palestine. You know, not just the reporting that led to your abduction, but before that, I mean, listen, you've been doing really important stuff, and you deserve a ton of credit for it. What stands out to you from your time there? I mean, for me, the stories you did going to the frontier between Israel and Gaza, where you have Israelis, cheering the blockade of humanitarian goods and having a good time doing so, that stood out to me. But I'm curious, your thoughts from your extensive reporting there, which was so important.
Well, I think during that time there, I also spent time with covering the settlers who are not thinking about the war right now. They're not thinking about anything in the now. They're only thinking about resettling in Gaza, making Gaza Jewish. And I remember then when I filed that report, and I was talking to Israelis who talk about how they're already planning their neighborhoods and their houses and their yeshivas in Gaza. People are saying, well, yeah, but those people are extremists. They're fanatical. That's not actually the government line or the policy. That's just you just found some fanatics. I said, okay, maybe you're right. I hope you're right. And now we see Itmar Ben-Gvir and different members of the Likud party are throwing events at the border of Gaza, reiterating exactly what those right-wing fanatical Zionists were saying. And I was told that that's not the government line. Now you see Itmar Ben-Gvir and different people of the Likud party calling for the resettlement of Gaza, making Gaza Jewish. Let's build our neighborhoods. Let's open our yeshivas. So I was, unfortunately, those people were not correct in saying that wasn't the government line. It just took a couple months for it to be proven true.
Yeah, I mean, there have been several, but one in particular, a major conference on settling Gaza, which featured speeches from 7 members of Knesset who are representing the Likud party of Benjamin Netanyahu. But you were one of the first to really get in there and report on this. Wow. Here's Daniela Weiss. Did you meet Daniela Weiss?
No, that's the old lady. No.
It's this nice woman.
Yeah, I didn't meet her.
Take what we acquired. So we plan to take what we acquired in the years of settling Judea and Samaria and to do the same thing here in Gaza. I want to tell you now that in less than a year, each one of you can call me and ask me, did you succeed in fulfilling your dream? And the answer will be yes. Actually, you don't have to call me, because you will witness how Jews go to Gaza and Arabs disappear from Gaza.
I mean,
aren't you guys proud to be Jewish right now? Don't you just fill with pride to be Jewish in this moment of time, seeing how our people are? It's, you know, yeah, this is the representative of our culture right now.
Well, that lady, she's not my people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of off track, but you know, I was thinking about the book of Exodus, and when Moses sees his brother who is a slave, Moses is taken in by Pharaoh and sees his brother who is a slave, a Hebrew slave, being brutally beaten by the overseer of the Pharaoh, and Moses strikes the overseer, grabs the whip, and beats the overseer to death, and then flees into the wilderness. And it's like the question, who is my brother here? Who's my brother?
And the brother's name is Aaron, right?
Brother Aaron.
Yeah.
Brother Aaron was Moses's spokesman because Moses had a hoarse voice. He couldn't speak very well. So, you know, maybe if I, you know, lose my voice, no, but I'm not comparing myself to Moses, but it's like, are my brothers just,
I don't foresee me ever having to speak for you, man.
Is Daniela Weiss my sister? This freakish Judeo-Nazi woman? No. Like, who's my brother? Like, I'm Jewish, but I'm also a member of the human family. So if I see people being abused, you know, that I think back on that tale, and I think, what would Moses do? And you have Zionists just think, do they have J positive blood? Well, therefore they're my brother. And if they're not on my side, then they're self-hating Jews. Everybody is looking at the footage of everyone is watching this, or many people watching this have seen the footage of a young girl who was 7 years old who was crushed under a roof, I think in Jabalia, and was brought out by some of the heroic first responders and rescue workers in Gaza, who will never get nominated for a Nobel Prize like the Israel-backed white helmets in Syria were. And they were trying to calm her down. Her entire family had been killed, and they managed to extract her alive. She died 4 hours later. It's one of the most horrific, harrowing videos I've ever seen, and it's giving me nightmares. And most people in the world, I would say 99% of people in the world, watch that and they think, what if that was my child? Or they think, that reminds me of my child. Zionists think, F around and find out. That's what you get. And I think they are people who have castigated themselves, if you can even call them people. They're demons who've castigated themselves from the human family. And so, you know, I don't feel this shame about being Jewish. I just have a different way of going about it than the Zionists. I don't know.
I know you've said this before, but videos like that and videos like the one of Daniela Weiss, like what videos and what content manufactures more anti-Semitism than videos and stories like that?
Yeah. I mean, they want to they want to spawn anti-Semitism, because that's what justifies the existence of the state of Israel as a sanctuary for Jews. Without anti-Semitism, how can they justify it? I mean, and we all know that there's no more dangerous place for a Jew to be than inside the militarized, constantly expanding frontiers of Israel. But what would they do without it? What would the ADL do? What would those guys do for work? It's not like Jonathan Greenblatt has any talent in anything else. So they need anti-Semitism to spread. And then they'll pass laws punishing everyone for doing what they have provoked them to do.
Actually, you just reminded me, like a quick story from when I was inside the courtroom. I was there the first time, like the first court appearance, and I told this person who was sitting next to me, who also was from the same NGO that my lawyer was from, but spoke English. And I said, like, listen, I just want to leave Israel. I just want to go back to New York. They're saying 25 years to life. Like, I just want to go to New York. And she said, did you tell your lawyer that? I said, yeah. She said, let me tell the judge. And so she stands up She's from the same NGO as my lawyer. She tells the judge, listen, he's just a journalist. He wants to go back to New York. Just let him go. Just even deport him. Just send him away. And my lawyer stands up and she says, no, he doesn't mean that. He's not in the right state of mind. He's just really scared. And I'm like, why would you tell the only person here with authority, the judge, that I'm not in the right state of mind? I'm insane. Why would you do that? And she said, because like we are saying you're Jewish and the judge is Zionist. And so the judge won't believe or won't understand a Jew saying he wants to leave Israel. Like, I'm supposed to be happier in my Israeli prison cell as a Jew than away from Israel. So she wouldn't even let me tell the judge that I want to leave Israel. She said, that's not good to tell a Zionist judge. That's not good to tell an Israeli judge. It's just a really demented interaction I had in that courtroom that one day.
Wow.
I've had that interaction with, when I enter, I did a comedy bit about it. It's like they ask like, are you Jewish? Are you Jewish? And like when you say you're Jewish, then they want to know if there's a possibility that you will make aliyah and you will become a citizen. And like once you give them the sense that you're going to do that, then you're immediately waved through. And it doesn't matter if whatever, like you have this record of anti-Israel journalism. And I mean, I'd say I'm going to see my girlfriend. And they'd be like, are you going to have children? Possibly. I'm like, yeah, we're talking about it. Jewish babies, demographic trench war. We're going to win. But, I just made that up. Obviously, I guess I'm persona non grata. And I'll be coming back the same way, like, Edward Said's grandchildren will be coming back, which is when the regime falls. That's pretty much the only way. And, we'll all go together. We'll drink a single malt with Ali Abu Nima in the village of Lifta, where his family's from. But for now, persona non grata. How does it feel to be persona non grata from the Jewish state?
Yeah, they've left the case is still open. So like I know that maybe I wasn't formally deported, but the case is open, and so I understand that if I ever try to go back, I would immediately be detained and be suspected of the same thing I was suspected when the case was open when I was there, which is giving information to an enemy during wartime. So it's a grave offense, and it will scare me away from ever going back to do critical reporting inside of Israel, probably as long as it exists.
Well, you've done some of the most consequential reporting for us at the Grayzone, not only from Israel, Palestine, but also from East Palestine, Ohio. Everyone should check out your video from there, from Lahaina, Hawaii, after the terrible fire engulfed that community. I mean, what I think you do in your videos is you just give people a platform, regular people a platform to say things that are so much more real than what anyone could say on the US corporate networks that are covering the same things. And so the coverage stands out. And it's something that I think we always aim to do at the Grayzone. And what I think should be rewarded is just people who want to go out and do real on the ground journalism. So we are going to be asking everyone who supports us to support Jeremy for another year of this kind of journalism. We'll have a crowdfunding campaign coming up soon. And so we hope you all will contribute to it so we can keep doing this kind of reporting around the world and also here in the US. We definitely need more of it, and it's filling a void. And it's something that people across the political spectrum can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for your courage, and sorry you had to go through that to get the message out.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, but it was just I even if it was just a fraction of what Palestinian journalists in the West Bank and in Gaza have been facing, just facing the full might of the Israeli military and penal system is what they face. I face a little bit of it, but just to be in solitary confinement with a bunch of Palestinians for just reporting critically on the state of Israel, it gave me tons of insight, and I only hope to use that to further my my reporting on these on like all of these horrible things happening. And in New York, right here in New York, I got sent back to New York. I live in New York. This is home to Richie Torres and his Bronx district, District 15, New York 15. And he has been gallivanting around, all the kibbutzim in the south of Israel with heads of the IDF, leaving his constituents in the Bronx, which is the poorest district in the country. And so that's something that now that I'm back in New York, I want to focus on, and I want to spend some time in the Bronx and really shine a light where the rest of the media has not been, which is around Richie Torres' district while he's in Israel.
Richie Torres is basically one of the biggest tools of the Israeli government in Congress, representing the poorest district in the United States. Jeremy has been working on a documentary about his district and Richie Torres' neglect of his constituents. So this is what you'll be supporting when you support Jeremy's work going forward. So we will give you the opportunity to support him with, $1, $5, whatever. It's all going to him. Thank you again for sharing your story with us, and we're really glad you're back and looking forward to more.
Thank you, guys. Truly.
All right. Jeremy Loffredo.
See you guys.
Peace. All right. I don't think we'll have time to clear everything out because I got a hard stop around 3 Eastern time. We were talking about, the plan in northern Gaza. We haven't even talked about Yahya Sinwar's killing. I guess that's been well covered by a lot of independent media. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the killing of the Hamas leader who spearheaded the plan for October 7th, the Al-Aqsa flood, and has one of the most consequential legacies of any Palestinian leader since 1948.
Only that the footage that Israel published obviously will solidify his legacy as someone who, symbolized resistance, fighting till the end. The footage of him, throwing an object at the Israeli drone that was monitoring him as he lay, severely wounded. Israel helped spread his legacy by doing that. Yeah.
This is a video that an Iranian outlet put out that really highlights the propaganda backfire that occurred when Israel published the footage of Sinwar's final moments. Yahya Sinwar was, I'll play it in a second, but just to give everyone a background if you don't have it, Yahya Sinwar Israel wanted to find him in a tunnel surrounded by hostages. They said he would be hiding there like a coward. They wanted their spider hole moment as the US had with Saddam Hussein. And they got the opposite. He was fighting with his men in the field to his last breath, dressed in fatigues with a kufiya wrapped around his face. And in his final moment, he threw a stick, slumped over in a chair with his arm badly wounded. In obvious discomfort, he threw a stick at a quadricopter drone that an Israeli was piloting, and they didn't kill him face to face. They killed him with a tank shell and a sniper. Who knows how many operations he staged. And the footage was published, I think, because one of the Israeli soldiers who first arrived after Sinwar was killed by a tank shell took photos of him, sent it to his fiancée, and then his fiancée put it on her Instagram page, and then it promptly went viral around Israel. So the army felt compelled to show his final moments. Still really stupid. And it shows how the Israeli regime, they don't understand how people think around the world, that people actually have dignity and respect resistance and respect the underdog position that the Palestinians are in. So this totally backfired, and Iran has produced, or an Iranian channel has produced this video, which I think perfectly crystallizes the propaganda failure of the Israelis in releasing this video. somehow we'll probably be demonetized for that. Although we could have shown an American flag being burned, no problem. But that really says what Israel did. Everyone wants to be Sinwar now, who wants to resist Israel. Everyone who feels abused to be Israel, he's their model. And so Israel has created that dynamic. Another point quickly about him is, he's being portrayed as this nihilistic terror mastermind, but he's left behind a really long record of his thoughts and was a fairly legitimate intellectual in the tradition of many Palestinian intellectuals who took on leadership roles, who were assassinated by Israel, like Hassan Kanafani, for example. In prison, he not only translated the autobiographies of several Israeli intelligence chiefs, but he wrote a series of novels called The Thorn and the Carnation, which he smuggled out in 4 parts. And that book is effectively banned in the US. Liberals talk about books being banned in like some public school library in Florida and howl about it, some book like My Two Dads or something about, gay relations that are being published for children, and Republicans freak out about it. And then liberals say books are being banned. No one has a problem with the fact that Yahya Sinwar's novel, which is basically his own autobiography, you're not allowed to buy it on Amazon. You're basically not allowed to purchase it anywhere in the US. The only way to get it is either on a PDF, or I got it from a South African publisher. I wonder what would happen if someone tried to publish it and get it in a book in the US, considering there were basically riots at a bookstore in Santa Monica over Helena Cobbin's new compilation called Understanding Hamas, which is just a series of essays and interviews. These books are basically banned nationally, and it will really show you, I've been reading it, who he was, and that he didn't love death or welcome death or war. And it's really a tender recollection. It begins as a tender recollection of life growing up in a refugee camp in Gaza, and how Israel stole his dreams and his family's dreams and crushed life all around him, leaving him with no other choice than to resist. It's also tells the story of the rise of Hamas alongside other factions. It's amazing how just the poverty of US media and the think tanks and all the analysts in their failure to convey what he really believed. And it's almost like they don't want to know. So they don't want you. This is a banned book, so I believe in reading banned books. It's called The Thorn and the Carnation by Yahya Sinwar. You can find it online somewhere.
In terms of his views, he expressed, a vision for the future that was in line with what other Hamas leaders said, including Ismail Haniyeh, where, he talked about a long-term truce with Israel. He talked about accepting a Palestinian state within the 1967 borders, which is, for Palestinians, a massive compromise. That's just 22% of what Israel stole from them. And he talked about, of course, insisting on the right of return for refugees, which they have. It's internationally recognized right. And if Israel and the U.S. were actually interested in peace, they could have engaged with that. They could have engaged with the fact that, Hamas leaders like Sinwar and Haniyeh were talking about accepting what the U.S. claims to support, which is a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. But they didn't, because they'd rather prioritize Israeli supremacy and its theft of as much West Bank land as Israel wants, while keeping Gaza in a cage. And you can find that in his past statements. And those statements, I think, presented a real opening that Israel and the U.S. simply just were not interested in pursuing. And so here we are today. His own legacy, I think, Palestinians can judge his contributions to the cause. My own opinion, sitting far away, doesn't really matter. What matters is what Palestinians think. And certainly what's just undisputed, no matter what you think about October 7th, what's undisputably true is that the Hamas leadership did put out overtures to the U.S. and Israel that were ignored, and that
rejected, and they were placed under siege and punished and attacked many, many times since the siege was imposed. And large swaths of Gaza were destroyed well before October 7th. So, I mean, the theory of October 7th of Al-Aqsa flood was he got himself out of prison along with 1,200 other Palestinians through the taking prisoner of an Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit. One soldier for 1,200 Palestinians. All diplomatic ties had been cut off. They had been placed under siege. So let's get more hostages and prisoners of war on October 7th and create a diplomatic opening. And we can see that Israel had a different idea, has unlimited bombs and weapons with which to ethnically cleanse Palestinians and expand the conflict into Lebanon, preventing any pressure from a ceasefire from affecting their calculus, which is to destroy the Palestinian nation. That's what they've been aiming at. The U.S. has been playing the role as their lawyer and arms dealer. And so after his death, as Blinken and Kamala say, there's now an opening for peace, the war escalates because the real obstacle to peace has always been Netanyahu and Israel and the U.S. itself. This was someone who was seeking peace, but on just terms that would set the basis for Palestinian sovereignty. And that was unacceptable, so he had to be killed.
I definitely agree with that. And what they mean, by the way, is this is an opening for peace. This is an opening to put Gaza, or what's left of Gaza, under a U.S.-backed, Gulf-backed dictatorship.
Yep.
Basically, that's what they mean by that.
So that is what is taking place. Great point. That is what is taking place now in Jabalia, one of the northernmost points in Gaza, along with Beit Lahia. The refugee camp is under Israeli siege, and they're trying to push everyone out according to the general's plan, which has been conceived by Brigadier General Giora Eiland, who is the ideologue of this war. He's sort of the person, along with his hardline former generals, who have been pushing for an ethnic cleansing plan in the north, removing all the population, creating a buffer zone. Then it'll be filled with bases and maybe settlers. I mean, it's very likely they'll try to, if they fulfill their plan, Jews-only settlements will return to Gaza, which then necessitate the constant presence of tens of thousands of Israeli soldiers at all times. And this is basically being accepted by the U.S. even as they oppose it. I mean, look at what's taking place in Jabalia. Look at these scenes. This is an academic named Nicola Perugini. Jabalia, Palestinian men separated from women and children and transferred to torture camps by Israeli military as part of the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. These are just packs of men. Israelis are told these are Hamas fighters. They're just any man. It's any man between 18 and 50. Sometimes they're children and they're even younger. And they're all going to be brutally tortured. Then we can see scenes of women and children and anyone else, the elderly, being driven out to who knows where, south to Gaza City, where the population is under heavy bombing. And throughout October, no aid has been allowed in. They're basically being told to starve or surrender. And that's the essence of the general's plan. And then you got Tony Blinken. I mean, here's the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem declaring it openly, just in case no one believes what's happening there. The world must stop the ethnic cleansing of northern Gaza. The magnitude of crimes Israel is currently committing in the northern Gaza in its campaign to empty it of however many residents are left is impossible to describe, not just because hundreds of thousands of people are enduring starvation, disease, without access to medical care, and incessant bombardments and gunfire defies comprehension, but because Israel has cut them off from the world. And as we saw earlier, Israel is announcing its plan to kill the only international journalists who are there, to cut the world off from northern Gaza. So in the midst of this crime, Tony Blinken arrives for his 11th visit. 11 visits, and he's accomplished what? Maybe what he always planned to accomplish, but he says that he's working tirelessly for a ceasefire. This is John Hudson from the Washington Post, who follows Blinken. Blinken questioned Netanyahu about a plan backed by some Israeli officials to gain full control of northern Gaza by starving out or killing Palestinians currently there. And U.S. officials insisted, this is from the report, that Netanyahu should go to greater length to say publicly that they are not following the general's plan. The Israelis declined to make such a commitment. Then today, Blinken was asked about this again. He's in Qatar, so he's facing a little bit more critical questioning there. And he's asked about the general's plan again. And this is what he had to say.
In the coming days. With regard to the so-called general's plan in the North, let me just say again, first, the United States fully and fundamentally rejects it. Second, as I told you the other day, the government of Israel says that it is not the policy of Israel and also rejects the plan. We reject any effort to create a siege, to starve people, to hive off northern Gaza from the rest of Gaza. We've been very clear about that. We'll remain very clear about that.
So how are they clear about that?
He's covering up for Israel as he's always done. And maybe he's forgetting he recently wrote Israel a letter, which he was forced to do because the siege was just so barbaric, complaining that Israel is blocking humanitarian aid into the north and giving Israel a 30-day deadline to take steps to reduce that. And of course, threatening consequences that will never come. So he's even acknowledged that Israel is blocking aid. He knows there's a siege. That reporting there for the Washington Post newly confirms it. And even though the Israeli government told him that they're not going to make a public statement disavowing the general's plan, there he is. They're going up in front of the public and doing that on Israel's behalf because Israel won't do it. So he's taken it upon himself to be an Israeli government spokesperson, putting forward a propaganda line that even they don't want to put forward because they know it's not true.
And this is what he's doing to be clear about the opposition to what Israel's doing in northern Gaza, establishing an air bridge.
The data shows the evidence unearthed by Al Jazeera uses open source flight data to show the scale of American and British involvement in Israel's war on Gaza and now Lebanon. The data shows more than 6,000 military flights in a year, including hundreds of transport missions ferrying arms to Israel. Israel flew only 20% of the 1,600 reconnaissance flights recorded, whereas the UK accounted for nearly half, using its Shadow R1 surveillance aircraft, which provided intelligence on ground movements in Gaza. The UK sent Israel targeting data en masse during 645 flights. The report reveals the extent of the weapons air bridge built for Israel. More than 1,200 military cargo flights made up the airlift over a year.
So you get the point. It's just constant, unprecedented arms deliveries on auto pay to Israel to make it possible to carry out the ethnic cleansing campaign that Blinken claims he opposes. And the plans are all there. I mean, there's plans on Benjamin Netanyahu's website for the post-war plan. Blinken has said we need to get to the post-war plan. What they mean is the complete pacification of Gaza as the cradle of resistance and the transformation, as you said, of Gaza into a kind of tribal administered UAE, Saudi, US, Israeli run dictatorship where anyone who refuses to surrender their biometric data is shot on sight and no form of resistance, including protest, is permitted, as the new Middle East that Blinken and his team support, along with Jared Kushner and his team, comes into being in their fantasy world. And Blinken, I assume when he goes back to the private sector, will make lots of money off that.
That Al Jazeera clip you just played of the military bridge provided by the US and UK to Israel, and think about what it's for. This is not for a conventional war between Israel and another army. For the last year, it's mostly between Israel and a defenseless death camp, where the only fighting Israel sees is, when it goes on the ground. But most of it has been Israel just bombing from afar. And so the US and UK have been instrumental in resupplying Israel as it just bombards a caged population of more than 2 million people. I can't think of a precedent in recent history where there's been so much military effort and weaponry put into bombarding and destroying such a defenseless target. It's hard to think over such a prolonged period of time too. And yes, some of it is also to fight Hezbollah in Lebanon, but that's only really amped up recently. So what we're seeing there in that video from Al Jazeera is mostly just a rearming effort, an intelligence effort to destroy a defenseless death camp where more than 2 million people are trapped and can't escape.
Because the sheer presence of Palestinians and Lebanese in southern Lebanon represents resistance.
Yes.
And so they're simply targeting the entire population. It's gone beyond the Dahia doctrine.
Yeah.
I mean, we could just call it the Gaza doctrine. And I think since time is running out for me here, I want to move on to Lebanon. And
okay, before we do, let me just say, as we're broadcasting, there's more news of Israeli massacres in the north, Jabalia refugee camp. Mossab Abu Toha, the poet from Gaza, he's reporting that Israel's hit 13 houses in one neighborhood, killing more than 150 people. That's what he's saying. So this is, it's just, it goes on and on. And earlier there was a strike on a school with a number of people killed. Israel striking a school in Gaza. People are sheltering. So this is just massacre after massacre.
Yeah. Also earlier today, a massacre at the Maghazi Sports Stadium in the Maghazi refugee camp. 13 children killed. Israel still allowed to be a member of FIFA while it bombs people sheltering in a soccer stadium after killing something like 50 athletes in Gaza, professional athletes. So moving on to Lebanon. I feel like Amy Goodman. We move to Lebanon now. And another member of Biden's team, or I guess is I don't know if he's a member of Blinken's team or Biden's team, but he's certainly a member of the faction within the Biden-Harris administration that sees Israeli escalation as a path to peace. War is peace, for Amos Hochstein, who is an Israeli citizen who served as an Israeli soldier in a tank crew. And he has put forward a surrender plan for Lebanon. Basically, the same plan that's being delivered to the residents of the Jabalia camp is being delivered to the entire, in similar fashion to the entire country of Lebanon. Surrender your sovereignty or face the violent consequences. This is the Cradle. U.S.-Israeli terms for Lebanon revealed: surrender, not ceasefire. Basically reading from the piece. Let me scroll down. So there have been leaks from the Lebanese negotiators who are around Lebanese parliamentary speaker Nabi Berri from the Amal movement, which is a Shia movement, and he's been sort of the interlocutor, helping communicate between the US, Israel, and Hezbollah, since they won't deal with Hezbollah directly. And the document that Hochstein put forward calls for an amended version of UN Resolution 1701, which was drafted at the end of the 2006 war. The document calls to change the language of the introduction to the UN resolution, making it an agreement aimed at establishing peace on the borders between Lebanon and Israel, preventing any armed presence in the Lebanese area near these borders. But it extends that disarming beyond the Litani River to the rest of Lebanon. I'm summarizing now. It would basically explicitly allow Israel to continue to operate militarily in southern Lebanon and to operate beyond the Litani River with its air force. So no, it's not a peace deal. It's a complete surrender of Lebanese sovereignty. And Hochstein has said that Lebanon needs to stop tying a ceasefire to a ceasefire in Gaza, so that Israel can continue to assault Gaza. So basically, the Biden administration is sending an Israeli guy to Beirut, where Israelis are actually banned, to tell them to subvert an agreement they already made through the UN in order to allow Israel to continue to operate inside their country. I mean, it's so insulting. They also sent, as kind of a force multiplier, Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, one of the most full-throated supporters of the genocide, to Beirut to demand that Israel be able to continue to attack them. In Lebanon, people fear for their loved ones every single day. Here too, she said, Hezbollah terrorists are irresponsibly hiding behind civilians and firing rockets at Israel every day. Israel must defend itself against these attacks. This is her in Beirut. She's calling the whole civilian population human shields. It's disgusting. She's a force multiplier for Huckstein. And so, of course, they're going to reject this. Just as the, what was it? The May 17th, it was the May 17th agreement in 1983, in which the Reagan administration was pushing a surrender of Lebanon's sovereignty, was rejected. And so Nabi Berri from the Amal movement rejects this absurd offer by the US. And here's the response. I mean, and what I'm doing here is I'm trying to illustrate how the Biden administration and Israel are working together to destroy Lebanon. Here's the response. So what's going on here? Our friend Steve Sweeney, the journalist, is in Beirut, and he explains Beirut is under attack once more with heavy bombing in the southern suburbs. The offices of Al Mayadeen have been struck. That is a outlet in Lebanon that produces some of the best reporting on the war. They have an English website, but anyone who speaks Arabic who wants to know what's really happening on the ground from a resistance point of view is going to turn to Al Mayadeen. So the war on journalism continues. They attack their offices, but Junaa and Uzai have also been bombed for the second time since Monday, when at least 18 people were killed after a missile destroyed an apartment block, wiping out 2 families. This is important. The reason for the attacks on these areas are in part an attack on the Amal movement. It's the same reason for the pressure on the Sahel hospital, whose director is an Amal MP. This is the hospital where Israel claimed falsely that Hezbollah is maintaining $500 million in gold and cash reserves, which has been visited by Steve Sweeney, the BBC. So many Western reporters have visited it that they can't find the cash. They're threatening to bomb that hospital. And this all comes after Parliamentary Speaker Nabi Berri, also from Amal, rejected the US-Israel surrender deal. So do you see what's happening here? Biden sends its Israeli negotiator to tell them to surrender. They refuse. And so the party and the constituency of those who surrender comes under attack, violent attack, by the mafia enforcer in the Israeli army. And that's how the US is seeking to negotiate. And what does Lebanon? What other choice does Lebanon have but to fight back with the only force that's defending its sovereignty, because the Lebanese army is officially banned from resisting Israel?
Well, the choice that the U.S. and Israel hope Lebanon makes is that they'll surrender and that they'll give up their Hezbollah's campaign to intervene on behalf of Gaza. That's why they killed Nasrallah, because Nasrallah insisted on linking the 2 fronts, the Lebanon front and the Gaza front. And according to an Israeli official who told NBC News, that's why they killed him, because he wouldn't drop that demand. He would agree to a 21-day ceasefire, but not to a permanent one unless Israel agreed to a ceasefire in Gaza as well. And, you mentioned 1983. There's a lesson there also for Lebanese and Palestinians about what happens when you do make an agreement with the U.S. and Israel. Because correct me if I have this wrong, but there was an agreement that got the PLO to evacuate from Lebanon, which was Israel's purported goal. And in return for that, there was, pledges made about respecting the safety of Palestinians still staying in Lebanon. And what happened? Sabra and Shatila, the massacre enabled by Israel, in which Israeli-backed forces just massacred civilians in a refugee camp. So that's a lesson of history that Palestinians and Lebanese remember very well, about what happens when you accept Israeli surrender terms. is they don't even abide by them anyway. They massacre people. And certainly I think that's on people's minds as they navigate this current moment and listen to the latest Israeli dictates, which happen to be parroted by the US, because all those things that Amos Hochstein, as you said, is demanding of Lebanon. That's what Israel wants. He's just there acting on behalf of Israel under the guise of representing the US government.
Incredibly important point. Couldn't clarify the situation better. It's really important to look beyond the rhetoric of Blinken and the other US so-called diplomats to see how they're using the language of peace to actually escalate and advance war. And they will be responsible if and when Israel strikes Iran and initiates a regional war. Why should anyone vote for that? Where's the red line of US voters? Kamala Harris was asked this question during a town hall last night by Anderson Cooper, basically that a lot of voters have set a red line of not supporting the Holocaust that she's sponsoring in the Gaza Strip. And now, a lot of Lebanese Americans, there are tens of thousands of them, I think hundreds of thousands of them in Michigan, are pretty outraged too to see their country and their historic sites, cities that are over 4,000 years old, being bombarded by Israel. Here's her response. I think this says it all.
What do you say to voters who are thinking about supporting a third-party candidate or staying on the couch, not voting at all because of this issue?
Listen, I am not going to deny the strong feelings that people have. I don't know that anyone who has seen the images who would not have strong feelings about what has happened, much less those who have relatives who have died and been killed. And I know people and have talked with people. So I appreciate that. But I also do know that for many people who care about this issue, they also care about bringing down the price of groceries. They also care about our democracy and not having a president of the United States who admires dictators and is a fascist. They also care about the fact that we need practical, common sense solutions from a leader who is willing to work across the aisle on behalf of the American people and not themselves. They want a president who cares about a fundamental freedom to make decisions about your own body, understanding that we're not trying to change anyone's belief, but let's not have the government telling women what to do with their body.
So there's kind of a trade-off there. Like, if you want more affordable groceries, then you have to allow Kamala to sponsor genocide in Gaza. If you want to continue having access to the abortion pill, you have to allow Israel to continue to carry out post-birth abortions on a mass scale across Gaza. I mean, what do you think of this messaging? Just from an objective standpoint, is this going to be effective in suppressing the anger in places like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania about the genocide?
Yeah, I mean, if your top issue is genocide and you're being told that you have to accept the genocide, but in return you'll get lower grocery prices and you won't get fascism, or you'll get, a better record on abortion. If your top issue is genocide, I don't think that's going to sway people, because their top issue is genocide. And they want to impose a cost on someone who supports genocide by serving in the administration that is currently facilitating it. If she wanted to, she could try to argue that Trump would be even worse, because there is a case to be made there. He is incredibly tight to pro-Israel donors. He's close with Netanyahu. Netanyahu, I think you can say, wants him to win. So she could go that route, but she doesn't, because she actually doesn't want to create any daylight between herself and Trump when it comes to supporting Israel, because those interests are the same ones that she serves. So for people watching all this and that their top issue is genocide, you are faced with the prospect that, yeah, Trump could be worse, or do you not impose a cost on the person who is in the administration currently facilitating the genocide of the last year? That's the situation that people are in, and she's doing nothing to reach the people who see this as their top concern.
Yeah, she's just completely writing them off. Donald Trump will come out and say he wants to raze entire Iranian cities to the ground, deport protesters who come out in the streets in opposition to Israel's assault on Gaza. And then what does Kamala do? She comes back and campaigns with the progeny of Dick Cheney, the most corrupt, worst living American war criminal, most likely, and argues that Donald Trump is not militaristic enough. And the October surprise for the Democrats, they always come out with some big reveal about Trump. Like in 2016, it was the tape of Trump joking with Billy Bush that he would grab women by their genitalia, which it didn't seem to work. This one is that John Kelly, this ultra militaristic general and deportation king, was hanging out with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump said, "I need generals like Hitler had." And it is revealed through former Israeli prison guard Jeffrey Goldberg at The Atlantic. And this is their closing argument to voters, that Trump admires Hitler and is a fascist, while everybody is in fact trying to pay for their groceries and dealing with real life issues, and also extremely outraged about the real life Nazism that they're seeing on their social media playing out in Gaza and Lebanon, courtesy of the so-called Jewish state backed by the Kamala Biden government.
And just
it just doesn't ring true. I mean, it seems so delusional, and it's like people who read The Atlantic, yeah, that might work for you, but you're not going to define what's going to happen on election day.
Well, also, and it's so desperate that, again, this is actually nothing new. You know, as this screenshot points out that we're showing on the screen, this claim about Trump wanting loyal generals like Hitler's, it dates back to August 2022. So
yeah, I remember that.
This is not even some October surprise. This is just the recycling an old claim that nobody cares about. Because, look, especially after Russiagate, where Trump got framed as a Russian agent, anybody who's remotely connected to critical thinking is going to stop accepting on faith all these claims made about Trump from other elements of the elite. It just doesn't really fly anymore.
It does. It seems so delusional. And then the obsessive, demented attacks on Jill Stein and the contempt to her supporters is deeply anti-democratic. I despise everything that Donald Trump is saying about foreign policy, but it's not being countered in any way. Instead, it's being legitimized, and the Democrats are basically saying, well, we're just simply more militaristic because the generals and the national security state, or the deep state as it's known, trusts us more. That's their closing argument. And Trump, well, he used to be a Russian collaborator and a Russian spy or asset or something. Now he's a fascist who loves Hitler, who was defeated by Russia. It just shows contempt for our understanding of history and how the world works. Meanwhile, the world's moving on. We don't have time. I have a hard stop. The world's moving on at BRICS. Putin is being visited, not just by leaders like Xi, but by Narendra Modi, and making win-win deals while Kamala and Trump compete for who can be more militaristic. So we'll hopefully have a live stream very soon to cover that and everything else we missed out on. And history is moving very rapidly right now. I feel like we're experiencing accelerationism, so there'll be a lot more to cover. Anything you want to add before we jump off?
Glad that Jeremy Loffredo is free. It's great to have him back today and hear from him in his own words. And thanks everybody for watching.
Thanks. And me and Jeremy will see you all, as we say, next year in Jerusalem, in a free Jerusalem. And look for that. Look for your opportunity to support Jeremy's journalism going forward into next year. We'll be telling you how you can do that. Support in any way you can. Like this stream, subscribe, all that good stuff. Sorry we couldn't join you for longer, but we'll be back soon. Peace.
Peace.